Beloved hearts, we gather today not as people defeated by time, not as souls bowed by waiting, but as children of hope standing tall in faith. This Monday, January 20th, we lift our voices not in fear, but in expectation. For there are moments in life when blessings feel paused, when doors seem slow to open, when obstacles rise like shadows in the path of promise. Yet I stand here to remind you, delay is not denial, and resistance is not defeat. Today we pray with courage in our bones and faith on our tongues, calling upon the Lord who makes a way out of no way. We cry out, not in desperation, but in holy confidence. Lord, break every delay and obstacle blocking my blessing. We believe that chains can fall, that walls can crumble, that what was held back can be released, and what was blocked can now flow freely. This is not just a prayer. It is a declaration that our time is now, our faith is alive, and our blessings are moving forward. Delay arrives quietly, like a pause between heartbeats, like a hush that falls just before the song begins again. It comes wearing the disguise of silence, carrying the weight of unanswered prayers, and often it asks us to wait longer than our comfort allows. But delay, beloved, is not the end of the story. It is not the closing curtain. It is not God turning away his face. Delay is not God's final answer. We live in a world trained to measure worth by speed. We praise what is quick, celebrate what is instant, and grow weary when results take their time. We want the blessing to come while our hands are still lifted, while our faith still feels fresh, while hope has not yet learned the language of endurance. But God in his wisdom is not bound by the ticking clock or the anxious calendar. He moves in seasons, not seconds, and he understands that some promises must mature before they can be received. Delay often feels like absence. It feels like being forgotten in a crowded room, like watching others pass you by, while you remain seated with your dreams folded neatly in your lap. You pray, and heaven seems quiet. You believe, yet the door does not open. You do everything right, but the answer does not arrive on time. And in those moments, doubt whispers its cruel question, did God hear you at all? But faith, when it has learned to stand upright in the waiting, answers back, yes, he heard, and he is still working. There is sacred work happening in the delay, work that cannot be rushed, work that shapes the soul more than the outcome ever could. In the waiting, God stretches our trust beyond convenience. He teaches us how to lean, not on what we see, but on what we know to be true. Delay strips us of shallow belief and replaces it with rooted faith. It asks us to decide whether we love the promise more than the promise giver, whether we trust God only when he moves quickly or even when he moves quietly. Delay teaches patience, not as weakness but as strength refined by fire. It trains the heart to remain open when disappointment tries to close it. It teaches the spirit how to breathe under pressure, how to hope without evidence, how to sing even when the music has not yet started. In the delay we learn how to stand without applause, how to keep walking when the path feels long and lonely, how to keep praying when our voice feels tired. And somehow, without announcing it, we become stronger than we were before. Sometimes the delay is not about the blessing at all. It is about us, about who we must become to carry what we are asking for. Because not every blessing can be handed to an unprepared heart. Some blessings require wisdom to manage, humility to steward, and maturity to sustain. God, in his mercy, delays the gift so it does not become a burden. He waits until our hands are strong enough, our minds clear enough, and our spirits grounded enough to receive without being destroyed by what we once desired. Delay also protects. It shields us from doors that look beautiful but lead to barren places. It keeps us from stepping too early into situations that would drain our joy, steal our peace, or fracture our faith. What we call delay, heaven may call rescue. What we call waiting, God may call mercy. And though we may not understand it in the moment, time often reveals that the pause saved us from pain we did not yet see. There is also the truth that delay does not erase the promise. A promise delayed is still a promise alive. It does not expire because time has passed. It does not weaken because the road is long. God's word does not lose its power simply because we have grown weary of waiting. What he spoke still stands, steady and sure, even when our emotions rise and fall like waves. Heaven is not confused about what it promised you. Delay invites us into deeper conversation with God. In the waiting, prayer becomes less about requests and more about relationship. We stop speaking only when we want something, and we start listening for who God is shaping us to be. We learn to sit in his presence without rushing him, to trust his heart even when his hand seems still. And in that quiet intimacy, something sacred happens. Our faith becomes less fragile and more fearless. We often look at delay as empty time, but God never wastes a moment. Every day of waiting is filled with unseen preparation. Connections are forming. Paths are aligning. Resistance is being moved out of the way. Strength is being built in places we didn't know were weak. The delay is active even when it feels still. Just because we cannot see the movement does not mean nothing is happening. And let us speak plainly. Delay hurts. It stretches hope thin. It challenges belief. It brings tears in the night and questions in the morning. Faith does not pretend that waiting is easy. Faith simply refuses to quit while waiting. Faith holds on not because it feels good, but because it knows who it is holding on to. Faith understands that God's timing is not cruel. It is careful. There will come a day when the delay makes sense. When you look back and realize that if the blessing had arrived sooner, you would not have been ready. That if the door had opened earlier, you might not have survived what was on the other side. Time has a way of revealing God's wisdom in hindsight. And when that day comes, gratitude replaces frustration and praise rises where complaints once lived. Until then, you stand. You trust. You pray. You keep believing that what God started, he will finish. You remind yourself again and again that delay is not denial, silence is not absence, and waiting is not wasted. You speak life over your situation. You refuse to let the clock talk louder than God's promise. You lift your head even when the journey feels long, and you declare with quiet strength that God's answer is still on the way. Because delay may sit at the table for a season, but it does not get the final word. God does. Obstacles announce themselves loudly. They rise like walls where roads once stretched open. They interrupt plans mid-sentence, and they demand attention as if they were final authorities over our future. They come dressed as closed doors, unanswered calls, rejected efforts, lingering sickness, financial strain, broken relationships, weary spirits. They stand tall and speak boldly, saying, "You cannot pass." But obstacles, no matter how convincing, are not permanent residents in the story of a faithful life. An obstacle is not a verdict. It is not a tombstone carved with the words "the end." It is a comma, not a period. It is a moment of resistance, not a lifelong sentence. Though it may feel heavy enough to bend the back and quiet enough to make us doubt our own voice, the obstacle is still subject to change. Time has a way of humbling what once looked immovable, and faith has a way of outliving what once looked impossible. We often mistake the size of an obstacle for its authority. Because it looms large, we assume it rules forever. Because it has been there a long time, we assume it plans to stay. But obstacles have no power of permanence unless we surrender that power to them. They exist to challenge movement, not to cancel destiny. They exist to test resolve, not to erase purpose. And though they may delay the journey, they cannot destroy what God has designed to arrive. Obstacles are teachers, though they rarely wear gentle faces. They teach us how to push, how to lean, how to stretch beyond the limits we once accepted as final. They teach us how to pray with more than words, how to hope with more than optimism, how to believe with more than emotion. In their resistance, they draw strength out of us we did not know we possessed. They force courage to stand up and introduce itself. There is something holy about realizing that obstacles do not get to choose the ending. They may shape the path, slow the pace, or demand detours, but they do not write the conclusion. They are chapters that must be read, not authors that control the narrative. And when faith learns this truth, it stands taller, breathes deeper, and walks forward with renewed determination. Obstacles often appear when progress is near. They show up not to prove failure but to announce transition. They rise at the edge of growth, at the threshold of breakthrough, at the moment when comfort must be exchanged for courage. And though they seem cruel in their timing, they are often evidence that movement is happening. Resistance is rarely encountered by those who are standing still. We must remember that every obstacle has an origin, and therefore every obstacle has an ending. It was not always there, and it will not always remain. What begins in time can end in time. What stands today can fall tomorrow. History is filled with walls that once seemed unbreakable, and now exist only as stories. Stones crumble, systems collapse, barriers weaken, and so will this. Obstacles can make us forget who we are. They can shrink our confidence and distort our vision. They can convince us that our struggle defines us more than our strength. But identity does not come from resistance. It comes from purpose. You are not the obstacle you face. You are the soul that rises to meet it. You are not the delay you endure. You are the promise moving through it. There is dignity in pressing forward even when the way is hard. There is power in refusing to let difficulty decide direction. Each step taken in the presence of opposition is a declaration, I am still moving. Each prayer whispered through resistance is a reminder that hope has not left the room. Each tear shed without surrender is proof that perseverance is alive. Obstacles do not respond well to fear, but they retreat at the sound of faith. Faith does not deny their existence, it simply denies their dominance. Faith looks an obstacle in the eye and says, you are real, but you are not eternal. Faith remembers that mountains move, seas part, and walls fall, not because they are weak, but because God is strong. Sometimes obstacles are external, standing in the world around us. Other times they live within, built from fear, doubt, past failures, and unhealed wounds. These internal barriers can feel even heavier because they travel with us wherever we go. But even these are not permanent. Healing can soften what trauma hardened. Truth can replace what lies constructed. Courage can dismantle what fear assembled piece by piece. An obstacle may block one route, but it cannot block every route. If one door remains closed, another may be forming unseen. If one path narrows, another may widen in an unexpected place. God is not limited to a single method of deliverance. When one way resists, another way responds. The obstacle may dictate how you arrive, but it cannot stop you from arriving. There is a moment, quiet and sacred, when an obstacle begins to lose its power. It happens when you stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start declaring this will not last forever. It happens when despair loosens its grip and determination takes its place. It happens when you decide that your future deserves more loyalty than your fear. Obstacles often fall not with noise, but with time. They erode under consistent faith, persistent prayer, and steady obedience. They weaken when you refuse to quit. They shrink when you keep showing up. They crumble when you continue believing, even when evidence feels scarce. And one day, almost without announcement, what once blocked your path no longer stands there. Then you look back and realize that the obstacle did not defeat you, it developed you, it taught you endurance, it refined your faith, it strengthened your voice, it revealed your resilience, and you stand on the other side not bitter but wiser, not broken but deeper, not empty but full of testimony. Obstacles are temporary visitors. They come, they test, they challenge, and they leave. But purpose remains. Promise remains. God remains. And because He does, what stands against you today will not stand forever. Prayer is not a whisper thrown into the dark, hoping something kind might hear it. Prayer is a force. It is breath-giving language. It is the soul standing upright and speaking its truth into the listening heart of heaven. When prayer rises, something moves, sometimes quietly, sometimes fiercely, but always with intention. Prayer activates divine intervention, not because God is reluctant to act, but because prayer aligns the human heart with the will that has always been ready. There is a sacred courage in prayer. To pray is to admit need without shame, to confess hope without apology, to believe that what is unseen is no less real than what stands before us. Prayer does not beg from weakness. It reaches from trust. It says, I know I cannot do this alone, and I also know I am not alone. In that knowing, power gathers. Prayer is not magic, and it is not performance. It does not depend on perfect words or polished sentences. It does not require a certain volume or a special tone. Prayer responds to honesty. It moves when the heart speaks plainly, when the spirit lays down pretense and stands naked before God. The truest prayers often sound like sighs, like tears, like quiet declarations whispered between breaths. When prayer is spoken, it travels beyond the limits of human understanding. It steps into spaces we cannot enter, addresses problems we cannot reach, and touches hearts we cannot change. Prayer works where hands cannot go. It opens doors that logic cannot unlock. It softens resistance that force cannot break. Divine intervention begins when prayer invites heaven into earth's unfinished business. Prayer changes situations, but it also changes us. It rearranges the furniture of the heart. It moves fear from the center and places faith there instead. It teaches patience to restless souls and courage to trembling ones. In prayer, we learn to wait without despair and to hope without conditions. We become more than we were when we knelt down. There are prayers that sound like thunder, bold and confident, calling things that are not as though they already exist. And there are prayers that sound like rain, steady and quiet, falling again and again until the ground softens and life begins to rise. Both are heard. Both are powerful. Heaven does not favor volume over sincerity. Prayer activates divine intervention, not always in the way we expect, but always in the way we need. Sometimes the answer arrives as change. Doors open, obstacles move, blessings flow. Other times the answer arrives as strength. Endurance replaces exhaustion. Peace replaces panic. Clarity replaces confusion. God intervenes not only by altering circumstances, but by fortifying the soul to stand within them. There is mystery in prayer. And there is also memory. Prayer remembers who God has been when we forget who He is. It reaches back into history and pulls forward testimony. Seas that parted, walls that fell, chains that broke, hearts that healed. Every prayer stands on the shoulders of answered prayers before it, declaring that what God has done once He can do again. Prayer does not require perfect faith. It grows faith. You do not have to arrive believing everything, only willing to believe something. Prayer meets us where we are, whether strong or shaky, confident or confused. It does not reject doubt, it invites it into conversation. And often, faith is born not in certainty, but in persistence. When we pray, we participate in divine movement. We are not spectators waiting for heaven to act. We are partners aligning ourselves with God's purpose. Prayer sharpens discernment. It teaches us when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to be still. It tunes the heart to divine timing so we do not outrun grace or lag behind obedience. Prayer also breaks isolation. It reminds us that we are connected to God, to one another, to a story larger than our own struggle. When we pray, we step out of loneliness and into communion. Even when we pray alone, we are never solitary. Heaven listens. Angels attend. Grace surrounds. Some prayers feel answered immediately, like light flooding a dark room. Others feel unanswered for a long time, like seeds planted deep beneath stubborn soil. But prayer is never wasted. Every prayer leaves an imprint. Every prayer shifts something, even if we cannot yet see the evidence. Delay in response is not absence of attention. Prayer teaches us to trust the unseen work of God. While we sleep, God moves. While we wait, God arranges. While we wonder, God prepares. Prayer allows us to rest in the truth that we are not carrying the full weight of our lives alone. Divine intervention does not clock in and out. It operates continuously, faithfully, lovingly. There is also power in communal prayer, voices rising together, faith multiplied by unity. When one voice grows tired, another carries the sound. When one heart weakens, another strengthens the rhythm. Collective prayer becomes a chorus that refuses silence, a declaration that hope will not be muted. Prayer does not deny reality. It confronts it with truth. It looks at illness and speaks healing. It looks at lack and speaks provision. It looks at fear and speaks courage. Prayer does not pretend the storm is not there. It simply believes the storm does not have the final word. Through prayer, we learn that divine intervention is not always dramatic. Sometimes it comes as wisdom to make a better choice. Sometimes it comes as restraint to avoid a harmful one. Sometimes it comes as forgiveness that frees us more than it frees the offender. God intervenes in subtle ways that reshape lives from the inside out. And when the answer finally arrives, when the door opens, the burden lifts, the path clears, we realize that prayer was not just the key to the miracle, it was the making of us along the way. Prayer taught us how to stand, how to wait, how to hope, how to believe even when evidence felt thin. Prayer activates divine intervention because prayer invites God into the center of our lives, not as a last resort, but as our first response. It declares trust before proof and faith before fulfillment. And in that declaration, heaven responds, not always on our schedule, but always with purpose. So we keep praying, not because it is easy, but because it is powerful. Not because we see everything changing, but because we believe something is. Prayer is the bridge between human need and divine action. And as long as we keep crossing that bridge, intervention remains possible. Blessings do not arrive casually, drifting into our lives without resistance or demand. They come carrying weight, asking questions of the heart before they ever settle in our hands. They ask whether faith is strong enough to believe before seeing, whether perseverance is steady enough to continue when progress feels slow. Blessings require faith and perseverance, not because God withholds out of cruelty, but because what is valuable must be approached with intention and care. Faith is not a soft thing, though it is often mistaken for fragility. Faith is muscle and marrow. It is the quiet strength that keeps standing when the knees tremble, the inner voice that insists on hope when evidence argues otherwise. Faith is not certainty about the outcome. It is trust in the one who holds the outcome. It is believing that goodness is still working, even when the path feels uneven beneath our feet. Perseverance is faith's companion. Faith believes, but perseverance stays. Faith sees the promise, but perseverance walks toward it day after day, step by step, even when the distance feels endless. Perseverance does not rush the journey. It respects the process. It understands that growth takes time and that strength is built through repetition, not shortcuts. There are moments when faith is easy, when blessings feel close, prayers feel answered, and joy comes quickly. But perseverance is forged in the moments when faith is tested. When the nights stretch long and answers stay quiet, when hope feels thin and doubt speaks loudly, perseverance is the decision to remain faithful in the absence of reward, to keep believing without applause. Blessings often arrive after long seasons of waiting because faith deepens with endurance. Shallow faith collapses under pressure, but tested faith grows roots. It learns how to hold steady through disappointment, how to survive unanswered questions, how to remain tender without becoming bitter. Perseverance protects faith from giving up too soon. There is a refining fire in perseverance. It burns away entitlement and replaces it with gratitude. It strips expectation of arrogance and reshapes it into humility. When we persevere, we learn that blessings are not owed to us, they are entrusted to us. And that trust demands character as much as desire. Faith without perseverance can grow impatient. Perseverance without faith can grow weary. Together they form a partnership strong enough to endure uncertainty. Faith says, I believe. Perseverance says, I will continue. One lifts the eyes to the horizon. The other keeps the feet moving forward. Life will test this partnership. It will place obstacles in the road, delays in the timeline, and discouragement in the mind. It will ask again and again whether we believe enough to keep going. And each time we choose to stand, each time we refuse to quit, faith gains strength and perseverance gains clarity. Blessings that come easily are often taken lightly, but blessings born through perseverance are handled with reverence. We cherish what cost us patience. We protect what required endurance. We honor what demanded growth. The journey teaches us how to carry the gift. Perseverance teaches us how to wait without wasting time. Waiting is not passive, it is active faith in motion. While we wait, we prepare, we learn, we heal. We strengthen ourselves for what is coming. Perseverance understands that stillness can be productive and that patience is not inactivity. It is disciplined hope. Faith and perseverance also teach us how to rise after failure. Because perseverance assumes that falling is not final. It allows room for mistakes without surrender. Faith reminds us that missteps do not cancel destiny. They refine direction. Blessings are not reserved for the flawless, but for the faithful who keep returning to the path. There is also grace in perseverance. It does not demand perfection, only commitment. It does not require constant confidence, only consistent effort. Perseverance understands that some days will be heavy and that progress may be slow. It measures success not by speed, but by persistence. Faith grows stronger when it survives disappointment. Perseverance teaches us how to hold hope without breaking under its weight. Together they build resilience, a quiet, unshakable confidence that says, I may not be there yet, but I am still on my way. Blessings that require perseverance often arrive quietly without spectacle. But when they do, they carry depth. They bring peace that is not easily shaken, joy that is not easily stolen, gratitude that runs deeper than circumstance. These blessings do not rest on surface happiness, they settle into the soul. Faith and perseverance also teach us to trust God's timing over our urgency. Urgency demands now. Faith trusts later. Perseverance waits without resentment. We learn that God's pace is purposeful, and that rushing the process can damage the promise. What is built slowly often stands longer. When blessings finally arrive, they often reveal that the journey mattered as much as the destination. We realize that faith reshaped our thinking, perseverance reshaped our character, and waiting reshaped our priorities. We become people capable of sustaining what we once only dreamed of receiving. Blessings require faith and perseverance because they are meant to last. God is not interested in giving us gifts that collapse us under their weight. He prepares us to receive what He intends to release. Faith opens the door. Perseverance keeps it open. And so we continue. We believe when belief feels hard. We endure when endurance feels heavy. We trust when answers feel distant. We persevere not because the road is easy, but because the promise is real. Faith and perseverance carry us forward, steady and sure, until the blessing arrives right on time. Every new beginning arrives carrying quiet courage in its hands. It does not announce itself with trumpets or demand applause. It steps softly into the room of our lives, asking one simple but costly thing: trust. Trust that what has ended truly needed to end. Trust that what is beginning has purpose, even if its shape is not yet clear. Trust that God does not close one chapter without already holding the next. Trust is the bridge between where we have been and where we are called to go. Without it, we remain stranded on familiar ground, rehearsing old disappointments and clinging to yesterday's pain. With it, we step forward, unsure but willing, afraid but faithful. Trust does not promise certainty. It promises direction. It says you may not see the whole road, but you will see enough to take the next step. New beginnings often come disguised as loss. A door closes, a season ends, a relationship shifts, a dream changes its form. And in the moment, it feels less like opportunity and more like grief. We mourn what was familiar, what felt safe, what once made sense. But trust reminds us that endings are not failures, they are transitions. They are invitations to grow beyond what we have outgrown. Trust requires release. It asks us to loosen our grip on control, to stop rehearsing the past as if it could be rewritten. Trust does not deny pain. It simply refuses to let pain decide the future. It acknowledges the wound but believes in healing. It honors the scar but refuses to live inside it. A new beginning is not about forgetting. It is about choosing not to be governed by what hurt us. Trust allows memory to become wisdom instead of a prison. It teaches us to carry lessons without carrying bitterness, to move forward without dragging yesterday behind us like an anchor. Trust grows slowly, often painfully. It is not built in moments of ease. but in moments of surrender. It is forged when we choose faith over fear, even when fear sounds reasonable. It is strengthened every time we say, I don't understand this, but I believe God is still good. Trust is not blind optimism. It is disciplined hope. New beginnings require us to believe that God can do something meaningful with what feels unfinished, that He can turn confusion into clarity, loss into redirection, delay into preparation. Trust believes that nothing in our lives is wasted, not the tears, not the waiting, not the mistakes. Everything becomes material for grace. There is vulnerability in trusting again, especially after disappointment, especially after betrayal, especially after prayers that felt unanswered. Trust asks us to open our hearts one more time, knowing they could be hurt again. But trust also knows that a heart closed for protection eventually closes to possibility. New beginnings need open hearts to breathe. Trust does not mean we will never struggle. It means we will struggle without despair. It means we will walk forward even when doubt walks beside us. Trust allows fear to ride along, but it does not give fear the steering wheel. A new beginning often feels small at first. It may come as a quiet resolve, a subtle shift in thinking, a gentle nudge toward change. It may not look dramatic or impressive, but small beginnings carry enormous potential. Trust honors the seed before it becomes a tree. Trust also teaches patience. New beginnings do not bloom overnight. Roots must form beneath the surface before growth becomes visible. Trust allows us to wait without rushing the process, to grow without comparing our pace to someone else's. It understands that timing is personal and purpose is precise. When we trust, we stop demanding immediate answers. We allow mystery to exist without panic. We accept that some questions will be answered only by time and faith working together. Trust rests in the belief that clarity will come when it is needed most. New beginnings require courage, not the loud kind, but the steady kind. The courage to try again. The courage to hope again. The courage to believe that the future can be better than the past. Trust fuels this courage. It reminds us that God has already carried us through things we once thought would break us. Trust also reshapes our identity. It shifts us from survivors to believers, from victims to visionaries. It teaches us that we are not defined by what ended, but by how we rise. A new beginning does not erase history, it redeems it. There will be days when trust feels thin, days when old fears resurface, when doubt revisits familiar arguments. Trust does not shame us for these moments. It simply asks us to return again and again, to keep choosing faith over finality. A new beginning is not a single moment. It is a series of choices, choosing to forgive, choosing to let go, choosing to show up, choosing to believe that God is still writing our story. Trust is the decision to keep choosing, even when the outcome is uncertain. When trust takes root, peace follows. Not the peace of everything being perfect, but the peace of knowing we are not alone. The peace of believing that whatever comes next, God will meet us there. This peace becomes the foundation on which new beginnings stand. Trust allows joy to re-enter our lives without guilt. It reminds us that happiness after hardship is not betrayal of pain, but evidence of healing. It gives us permission to laugh again, dream again, love again. A new beginning starts with trust, because trust opens the door to possibility. Without it, we stay trapped in what was. With it, we step into what can be. Trust does not promise an easy path, but it promises a guided one. And so we trust, not because we have all the answers, but because we know the one who does. We trust that God is faithful. We trust that what lies ahead holds purpose. We trust that beginnings are not accidents, but divine invitations. We step forward gently, bravely, honestly, carrying our past with wisdom, not weight, holding our future with hope, not fear. A new beginning starts with trust, and trust is enough to begin.